Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a huge question. What does it actually mean for a nation to be secure? And you'll see, the answer goes way beyond just armies and borders into some really fascinating territory.
All right, let's jump right in. Here's our game plan. We're going to start by figuring out what security even is. Then we'll look at the traditional playbook. After that, we'll get into a more modern, regional way of thinking, break that down into 5 key dimensions, and then we'll tie it all together to see why this is so important today.
So, first things first. When we use the word security, what are we really talking about?
I mean, you hear it all the time, right? It's in the news, you hear it from politicians, it's all over debates about national defense. But the true meaning? Well, it's often misunderstood, and it goes so much deeper than just soldiers and weapons.
At its core, the main idea is that security is about being free from threats. It's about a country's ability to protect its own unique identity, its culture, its way of life, from hostile forces trying to change it. Basically, it's about preserving the very soul of a society.
But, when you strip away all those complex layers, when you get right down to it, security is about one thing, and one thing only: survival. Everything else we talk about is built on top of that fundamental need to just exist.
So how did people traditionally think about this whole challenge of survival? Well, for a very long time, the approach was pretty straightforward.
For ages, security was seen almost entirely through a military lens. You basically had 2 moves. On one side, you had defensive security. That's just reacting to threats by building up your army. And on the other, you had offensive security, using your power to go out and get an advantage.
And this quote from Kenneth Waltz, it just captures that mindset perfectly. He basically argued that the world is a chaotic place, so you can't rely on anyone else to save you. A nation's security was all about its own strength. And that playbook almost always led to one conclusion: you need a powerful military.
But here's the thing. That whole military-first approach, as important as it just wasn't the whole story. It was missing some really big pieces of the puzzle.
And this is where our whole understanding of security takes a huge turn, shifting our focus from the entire globe to a nation's own neighborhood.
So meet this guy, Barry Bazan. He was a thinker who came along and argued that if you really want to understand a nation's security, you have to look past its military and start focusing on its geography and its neighbors.
Bazan's key insight was this: a country's most serious security problems are tangled up with the countries right next door. A threat from halfway around the world can feel kind of abstract, right? But a threat from your neighbor, well, that's immediate, and that's very, very real.
He even gave this idea a name: a regional security complex. Now, it sounds a little academic, but the idea is simple. It's that neighboring countries are basically stuck in a shared security bubble. What happens in one country directly affects the security of all the others, which means you can't possibly understand one without looking at the whole neighborhood.
And Bazan didn't stop there. He took this idea even further and argued that security isn't just one thing. It's multi-layered, kind of like an onion, and it has 5 distinct but totally interconnected parts.
So yeah, we're not just talking about military strength anymore. Bazan pointed out 5 key sectors. There's military, political, economic, societal, and even environmental. Let's dig into what each of those actually means.
This breakdown is great because it shows how each area faces totally different kinds of threats. Military security, that's the one we all know. Threats of physical force. Political security is all about stability. That could be threatened by anything, from another country meddling in your elections to an internal coup. Economic security, well, that can be wrecked by a global financial crisis. Societal security is about protecting a group's culture and identity. Think about the complex tribal dynamics that cross the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And finally, environmental security deals with threats from nature, like a monster hurricane, and also human-made problems, like climate change.
Okay, but if you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this: you absolutely cannot look at any of these dimensions by themselves. They are all deeply, deeply connected. A problem in one area will always ripple out and affect all the others. It's like a domino effect.
So that's a lot of theory. Why should you care about any of this? What does it all mean for us today, in the real world?
Because it gives us a much better tool for understanding the real causes of conflict in the 21st century. The biggest challenges we face now are rarely just about the military anymore.
I mean, just think about it for a second. A massive economic crisis can easily trigger political chaos. A drought or a flood can turn communities against each other as they fight over resources. Boom, you have societal conflict. And as we see all the time, a battle of ideas, of ideologies, can be every bit as dangerous as a battle with guns and tanks. Today's biggest threats don't stay in one lane, they cut across all 5 of these dimensions.
So, this all leads us to one last really critical question. In the super-connected world we live in, where these 5 dimensions are more tangled up than ever, which layer of our security do you think is the most vulnerable right now? Is it our economy, our environment, or maybe it's the very fabric of our societies? Thinking about this framework isn't just an academic exercise. It's the first step toward finding that answer.